Hello and welcome to the Royal College of Surgeons. This is National Careers Week and we now have a webinar on building your portfolio. My name is Fiona Minch and I'm a consultant vascular and general surgeon. I have on my right Andrew Brodie, who is ST3 in neurology, and on my left Lucinda Codas, who is a foundation trainee. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about portfolios and then we'll be open to questions which you'll be free to ask. And you are aware, I hope, that you have two screens, I believe, and you can change the size of your screens if you want to see something one side bigger. For instance, you might want to see us smaller and the text bigger. So, first of all, what does your portfolio say about you? The button isn't working. Oh, there it is. What does your portfolio say about it? Well, your portfolio is evidence of your professional achievements, and it's something for you to produce to show everybody else. It's for you to compare yourself against your peers as well. So, for instance, what you have in your portfolio, you want to be better than what's in everybody else's portfolio. It can also demonstrate your reflective practice. So not only in terms of what you have in terms of your clinical achievements, but also ensuring that you have a broad outlook. So in other words, whatever the different content parts in your portfolio are, you want to have something in every single section. It's also part and parcel of the surgical interview, whether you're interviewing at core level or at ST3 level. And even for us, what we have in our portfolio is part of revalidation. So your portfolio is really very important. Okay, so this is a list of what your portfolio should contain. And what I'm going to do is go through this list bit by bit so that you don't have to be overwhelmed by this one particular slide. So the first thing is you should have a copy of your CV. And in fact, you should have more than one copy. It should be stapled together and you should have easy access to each page. And the reason for that is, particularly if you're presenting an interview, is that you may be interviewed by more than one person and you don't really want them scrabbling over the same copy. You want to have your work-based assessments, whether you're at undergraduate level with ePortfolio, whether you're at foundation level with ePortfolio, whether you're at core level with the ISCP. You want to have a selection of your work-based assessments and possibly a summary of them. If you're applying for anything higher than foundation, then you really want to have your foundation sign-off or your equivalence of foundation competency. And likewise, if you're at core, you want your completion of core training, certificate or whatever, or your outcome ones for core training. And then as a surgeon, you want a logbook, and it's important to have a logbook that covers everything that you have seen and everything that you have taken part in. Particularly if you're, say, a medical student, you may not have actually done much in the way of operating, but if you have an observer logbook, in other words, all the operations you've been to see, what it shows is that you've been to theatre and that you've shown an interest. And it's good to have this validated or verified. In other words, get someone to sign it to say that you really were there. And then you want to collect together all your prizes, certificates, and any accolades that you might have. And actually, if you're fairly junior, it doesn't matter if they're not all surgical. It doesn't matter if they are prizes for something you did at school. So even certificates for getting grade 8 piano is useful to have in your portfolio, because what it does is it shows you're an achiever. It shows that you can put your mind to something and take it through, see it through to the end, and achieve something with it. And then you want to have evidence of the courses that you've been to. Again, the courses don't have to be surgical. It helps if they are, if you're applying for a surgical job, but any course that you've been to that is of any relevance. So it might be a course on, we all have courses, for instance, on equality and diversity, for instance. Proof that you've been to that's kind of helpful. Any audits, and audits, not just a list of audits, but actually it's quite nice to have a printout of the audit, and in particular any audits where you completed the audit cycle, because they're much stronger than a standard audit without that. If you've done any research, whether you've done any research before you've gone to university, before you've gone to medical school, or whether you've done an integrated BSc, something like that, that research is useful to have, and any publications and presentations, and any abstracts as well. It's good to have those in full form rather than just the name, but if you do document these, then you should document them fully with all the authors, not just yourself, where you did it and the date that you did it or the year that you did it and the institution that you did it at. It's not good enough just to have audit on compound fractures of the tibia. It's got to have the detail in it. And then evidence of reflective practice. And reflective practice is as far as the GMC is concerned, and obviously therefore very important, an important thing to have. One has to be careful though. As we know that in the media lately there have been incidences of doctors being criticised for having put too much detail in their reflective practice and actually suffering as a result of that. So it's important to be very broad in your reflective practice. You should have the practice, but don't put finer detail in. Certainly don't put patient identifiable detail in that. But it's important to do that on a fairly regular basis for all of us. And because reflective practice allows us to improve our practice. And then any evidence of involvement in management, and that can be anything from being the mess president to being the student representative on a committee, or the trainee representative on a committee, or being the rota coordinator, someone who writes the rota. I know that when I was a registrar like Andrew, I invited myself to be the trainee representative on the haematology committee, and that went on my CV. So there you go. And then there's evidence of teaching, and the important evidence that you want really is the feedback from that teaching. So it's fine to put in timetables. So we all teach as part of our jobs, and that can be teaching in a formal manner or an informal manner. So we all teach on the ward when we're doing our ward rounds. We have medical students, and some of us actually have formal teaching. I know that Lucinda might talk to you about that later because she's done some formal teaching in our institution. But the feedback's really important because firstly that's evidence that you have actually done the teaching and not just set it up, but it's also evidence that you are perhaps good at it, and also can reflect on it. Evidence of leadership and teamwork, that can be part of your reflective practice. For instance, if you've been to running many trauma calls, something like that, or there may be something you've done bigger than that. For instance, some of you from overseas might have done national selection, national, what's the word, when you're working in the forces. National service, thank you, national service. And certainly I've interviewed people that have done that in the past. And that shows that you can run a team, lead a team. And then there's all the other bits and pieces that perhaps are a little bit less specific, but actually really useful to have in your portfolio. So thank you letters from patients, from faculty, if you've helped out with faculty, from staff members, any relevant correspondence. And that could be correspondence to thank you for being involved in something. And any further evidence of commitment to specialty. And this can be anything from having done a taster and evidence of having done a taster in something. So say if you're going to do a taster in surgical specialties, or if you've been involved peripherally in a research project where you don't have much evidence of it, or even if you've done the Part A RCS, and that shows that you really have an interest in doing something surgical. So if you're applying to national selection for interview, there's often a checklist for what you need to put in your portfolio, and this is an example of the 2018 core surgical training portfolio checklist, which is 2 pages. Certainly in core, you're asked to score yourself, and then it gets scored again in the interview, and these are the types of things that they'll be looking for. So that's the first page, and that's the second page. And as you see right at the end, there is commitment to surgery, which clearly we're looking for because we want to know that you really want to be a surgeon. So in terms of building your portfolio, you really want to be looking to fill every single section of that, because you're going to be able to score points on every single section. And what you really want to do is not have everything in one section. For instance, you don't want to have 15 audits where you completed the audit cycle but actually no presentation. So you want to spread yourself broadly across the portfolio so you can score points for everything, because you can only score so many points in each part. And that's part of the reflective practice of looking at your portfolio on a regular basis. So yes, you can do audits and publications. You can ask your boss if there's anything that they want you to write up. You can join your local teaching faculty and become part and parcel of that. The Royal College of Surgeons here, we run a skills competition at core level, which you can enter, and there's a prize for that as well, which could go in the prize section if you win it. You could start a journal club, and that's in some respects, that's a bit of education and management. If you're into research, then we offer many research fellowships here at this college for formal research. Or if you want to join your local surgical research group, there are many set up all over the country where groups of trainees have got together to do group projects, and you can be acknowledged on those when they're published. You can contribute to the annals of the Royal College of Surgeons, and certainly there is currently a prize for the best trainee written paper, and that's worth entering for. Or you can contribute to the bulletin, much more on topical things to do with surgery. Maybe in relevant audits and things like that can often be published in the bulletin. You can volunteer for careers events, and certainly there are often school events where we go around the schools teaching the students to suture, and you can come and help with those. And as I said, you can volunteer to be a trainee on a local committee. There's WINS if you're a female surgeon, for the lady surgeons amongst you, or aspiring lady surgeons amongst you. And all of you can become an affiliate of the College of Surgeons. And what this will do, it will give you some regular updates on what's going on in surgery and access to all types of functions that you can go to relevant to surgery. As I've already said, you can consider studying for the Part A and RCS and attend relevant courses to surgery. And many medical schools, if you're a student, have surgical societies. I know that our one at UCL is fairly active. And they're often national student meetings as well. I'll hand over to Andrew now. Can he tell you a little bit about putting his portfolio together physically?
Okay, so hopefully you can all see a few pictures, which is essentially a picture of my portfolio. I went through two sort of interview processes. One was to gain a place on core surgical training, and the second was to get a number in urology, which is where I'm at now. So the picture on the top left is the folder I used for applying to ST3 urology. And essentially I just bought that online and had it customized to have my name put on. And really with the portfolio, what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for the interviewer looking through your portfolio to be able to give you all the marks and ticks that you need to get a high score. So you want to make it very simple. So I use coloured and numbered tabs along the side. And really the most invaluable document you can get hold of is the checklist that they give you, because it describes exactly what they're looking for. Particularly with core surgical training, if you look on the website, you can look at the way that they score you and how they sort of attribute marks for each section. So each tab of mine correlated with each section. So the first was sort of qualifications, and then courses, audits, teaching, etc. Now the person you interviews won't really have that much time with you to really find out about you. They only have 10 minutes, and while you try to sort of convey your character, really the first thing they see is your portfolio. So for core surgical training, they have 10 minutes before they see you with your portfolio. And for national selection, they have 30 minutes. So you need to make sure that you're kind of conveying that you're, well organised, which will come out in the way that you organise your portfolio. Hardworking, hopefully in the content that you have within your portfolio. And obviously make it that you're aware of how you present yourself. So it needs to look really neat and tidy. You need to spend a lot of time doing it, really. And the key thing is to prepare early. Don't leave it till the last minute. Otherwise, frantically the night before, you'll be rushing around looking for bits of paper. So I think when it actually comes to getting the portfolio together, I really would stress again, you need to start a few months before. Regarding the CV, so the picture on the bottom right, I actually put I had a CV within my actual folder itself, sort of within the ring binder. And also had two separate CVs in separate plastic sheets. And that just meant while one person was looking through your portfolio, a second person could be leafing through your CV and checking it all marries up. I think that makes it a bit easier for the person marking you. And then the last picture on the bottom left was my portfolio for applying to core surgical training. It's just to give you a rough idea of how thick it is. So obviously you don't want to be bringing volumes and volumes and carrying it in a wheelbarrow. It needs to be, of a size that's easy to leaf through, and you need to know where everything is because you might have to quickly find it.
Okay. And I'd agree with Andrew there, having once attended an interview where someone brought their portfolio in a suitcase, it was really quite disconcerting. Okay, so a few tips for interviews. In terms of your portfolio, you should update it every 3 months. Now, at least if you aim to update it every 3 months, you might do it every 6 months. And I know we all get very busy, but aim to do it every 3 months. Identify and fill your gaps well in advance. For instance, if you don't have a publication, you know that's going to take probably a year to get off the ground and into print. And balance the components of your portfolio. That means, as I said earlier, don't have a huge thick section for audits and nothing for anything else. Make sure you've got something in every single section and it's well balanced. Also, weed out any of the unnecessary items that are out of date. For instance, if you're applying for ST3 or for higher training, you don't really need your A-levels in there anymore. And I have seen that in there. Don't put unnecessary things in the portfolio, because, as Andrew says, at interview, there's only a certain amount of time to look at it. They don't want to be wasting their time looking at things that are not really relevant at this stage. Use a fairly plain folder or file with your name clearly on it, just like the one Andrew used. And ensure that there's an easy-to-follow contents page with tab sections, just like the coloured tabs that Andrew had, with a nice contents page just inside the front, so it's easy to find things. And that's not just easy for the interviewer to find, but easy for you to find if you're asked in interview to please show me your evidence for. You can find it very easily. So if there is a checklist at interview, try and file things in the same order so that it's easy to find. So in other words, if they put CV first, you put CV first. And make sure that you have easy access to each page. So sometimes it's quite helpful to have the CV done in separate pages at one point, but also as a clipped together section at another point, so that you can actually easily access each page. Please make sure there is no patient identifiable data. That includes hospital numbers, dates of birth, initials. That has to be out of your portfolio. And I have to say, having interviewed for core surgery this year, the candidates we have to take aside after the interview are the ones that have patient identifiable data, to tell them, actually, we're now going to destroy this page for you because you can't take it home on the train. To make sure you know where to find specific items. So when you're preparing, ensure your portfolio is up to date. Make sure you read the guidelines and the handbook, because there's normally an application handbook. If you haven't read it, then you're not fully prepared. Adhere to the checklist, book time off work really early, well in advance, so that, because by and large there'll be more than one of you in your department going for the same interview. Gather your paperwork early and arrive in good time. If you arrive in good time and present the right paperwork, you won't be flustered. And prepare to be yourself. We are interviewing you at interview and not some imaginary ideal surgical trainee that you think we might want you to be. Let us be the judge of whether you're suited for this career and how well you're doing. Okay. So in terms of paperwork, you're normally asked to bring passport or proof of identity. If you're from overseas, proof of entitlement to work in the UK and proof of address. Proof of license to practice, so often that's your GMC certificate. And primary medical qualification, and as from later on this year, you will need verification of your PMQ if you come from overseas, and that's done through specific channels. If you have postgraduate qualifications, bring the certificates and any other relevant qualifications, and as I've said earlier, proof of foundation competencies, and proof of English language skill if you require it, so either IELTS or the OET is now recommended also. The OET specifically for medicine. And of course your portfolio with its checklist. So here are some useful websites: the College of Surgeons of England, and the website for the core surgery information is the London Postgraduate Medical Dental Education website. And become an affiliate of the college. So these are all the things that the college can help you with. There are webinars such as this one and other ones that we'll be producing later on. You get discounts on face-to-face and online courses, and there's a range of bursaries and rewards and say research bursaries that you can apply for. We put on a number of regional events which are either very cheap or sometimes free, and these allow you to network with people such as the three of us here. And volunteer for opportunities that are going to add to your portfolio, and we can sometimes guide you in that. And of course, publishing both the bulletin and the annals, as I've said earlier. And you'll get regular newsletters sent to your email address to keep you up to date as to what's going on. And it's really very worthwhile, and it's really not expensive at all. So I'm going to hand over to Lucinda now, because Lucinda is my foundation trainee, and she's done an awful lot to enhance her portfolio. I thought it would be great for those of you at her stage to hear what she's done.
Thank you. So yeah, I thought that it'd be appropriate to share with you the good advice and tips that I've received in building my portfolio and actually what I'm currently doing. So my first bullet point is to be focused, and this alludes to what Andrew was saying about downloading the checklist. Know where you're going to get your points from and how you're going to get them. So I'll just briefly go through all the points in the checklist now and tell you the kind of advice that I've been given and the steps that I've been taking to gain those points. So in terms of audits, it's something that I've focused on more as an F1 rather than as a medical student. I was involved with Star Surge as a medical student, which was really helpful in learning the ropes of how it works. But it's also quite difficult to get access to patient information you need for an audit as an F1, as a medical student. Because when you're an F1, you're in the hospital and you're actually able to identify key areas that you yourself are interested in and would like to audit. You'll be in the same hospital for a year, so it enables you to kind of complete the audit loop rather than moving around like you are as a medical student. Another piece of advice regarding the audit that I've received is that it's better to do something small and complete the loop rather than take on lots of different big audits which you're not going to complete. So channel all your energies into one project which you can run and ensure that you'll complete the loop. In terms of teaching, again, it's something I've focused on as an F1 rather than a medical student because I feel like I've developed more skills for teaching as an F1. When I first started working as an F1, we were all encouraged to get involved with twilight teaching, which is really useful and has been a really good experience. But as a surgical trainee, as a hopeful surgical trainee, I wanted to engage more with teaching surgical skills. So I went to Miss Min and asked if there were any opportunities available with UCL medical students, and have now used the skills that I've gained from the Royal College Basic Surgical Skills course to teach the medical students. So this has been beneficial for me because I've been able to practice the surgical skills that I've learned, and also being more fun for me because I'm teaching the skills which actually I'm more passionate about. And as Ms. Mint said, such an important part of that has been getting feedback so that I can develop my teaching skills and keep developing the course for the medical students. In terms of presentations, abstracts and publications, that was something I actually focused on more as a medical student because it just tied in better with the medical school training. At UCL, we do a BSc, so actually you are doing a research paper. So it's better investment of your time to kind of try and extend that into a publication. And as Ms. Mint said, these things can take time to progress, so it's better to start on them early. Also, get as much as you can out of one piece of work. So I wrote one paper, and from that I had 2 oral presentations, 2 poster presentations, and a publication. So from that one paper, you can get a lot out of it, which is a lot to add to your portfolio. Don't feel like you have to, do 5 different posters and publish 5 different papers. Make the most of what you've got. And then in terms of extra courses that you can go on, make sure you look them all up in advance because they book up really quickly. And also you have to tie it in with your annual leave or with your study leave. Another thing which I found useful is that I've just completed the Basic Surgical Skills course. And I did that in March, and I'm currently on my vascular surgery rotation. I'm moving on to renal transplant. So I wanted to gain those surgical skills so that I could implement them immediately. So I gained those skills and I'm on a surgical rotation so I can start practicing them straight away rather than being on a medical rotation for the next 4 months. And then you get points for clinical and procedural experience, and make sure that you try and get them recorded as docs because then you have feedback from your seniors about what you've done well, and then you can also reflect on it. So you're not just showing that you've got those skills, you're also showing how they're helping you develop. And then the commitment to surgery section, like Ms. Mint was saying, keep a logbook so that you can show that you've been engaged with surgery as a medical student. And actually, I was able to see lots of surgery as a medical student. And again, you've got the time to get into theatre, so start building on that as a medical student. And I also took an elective in vascular surgery, And finally, I'm currently revising for my Part A RCS, so fingers crossed. And then the final part of the checklist is your BSc and your exceptional performance at medical school. So just try your best, but when you're in F1, there's not much more you can do about that. The next bullet point on efficiency is just again alluding to how you should try and tie things together to get the most out of what you're doing. So if you're doing a surgical skills course, also think about teaching those skills, and don't see kind of reflection as something which is independent in your portfolio. Reflect on everything that's in your portfolio. So try and keep everything tied together rather than seeing them as different objectives. Again, be efficient with your time and do the right thing at the right time. Take opportunities when you have them rather than trying to create extra work for yourself. And I like to only take on one big project at a time. Everyone's different. Some people thrive balancing multiple things at once. But just be mindful that you only have limited capacity to do things, so don't try and spread yourself too thinly if you can't. And also, I found it's useful, don't be afraid to say no if you feel like you can't take on a project. Often consultants will come to you and they'll offer you things, and it will be an amazing opportunity, but if you don't have the time to do it, say no, and they'll actually, I believe, respect you far more for saying thank you for the opportunity, but actually I don't have the time, rather than saying yes to them and not fulfilling that promise. And then the point to be organised, at least what Andrew was saying, is don't be scrapping around trying to get your portfolio together last minute. So in October, I attended the ASSET course on preparing for a career in surgery. And the following day, I started to compile my portfolio. And I'm a very organised person. I have everything to hand. And it actually took me about a day to put all of this into a portfolio form. And you want to make sure that you're doing it early and adding to it rather than creating it at the end. And if you've got a medical student email account, make sure any certificates that you have emailed to that are transferred to your base email, because you don't want to lose that evidence when your uni email gets shut down when you graduate. And actually, it's really nice to start your portfolio early, because I think you'll be really surprised at everything that you have already achieved. And actually, it's a really nice feeling to see that portfolio and to watch it grow. And then my last 2 points are kind of tied together about talking to people and having fun in surgery. So when you talk to people and let them know you want to do surgery, they're really supportive, and they'll get you into theatre and they'll get you involved in audits. And I wouldn't be here today if you didn't know that I wanted to do surgery. And then the last point to have fun is because our applications are essentially a checklist, and you have to fulfil those points. And also, it does come with a lot of pressure, and it's easy to lose sight of actually why you're doing it. So make sure that you remember to enjoy it and engage in projects which you're interested in. So your audits, your research, and your teaching are real enjoyable things.
Okay, thank you. So, I think we're now open for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so we're being asked a question, is there such a thing as putting too much in a portfolio? Well, I think Andrew's already alluded to the fact that you don't really want to bring a suitcase with you if you're going to an interview. And I've already said that we should weed out the things that are not relevant. So I suppose there is. I have been at interviews where people have come in with their portfolio and they've been involved in writing chapters in books, and they've brought every single book with them. You don't really need to do that. I think most people should have a standard portfolio about the size of Andrew's, and probably not much bigger than that. Okay, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree. So there's a few things you can summarise. So your logbook, you can print out a summary of all the operations you've done, which tends to take up less space. For some of the assessments, like DOPS and mini-KEXs, you don't necessarily need to put every single one in, because you print out your whole ISCP logbook. It will take quite a few pages and fill up your portfolio. So you can be selective. Perhaps the ones which receive particularly good feedback are the ones that you're most proud of. Most of your certificates will need to go in there, but it needs to be manageable so that you know where everything is, and also the people looking through it can leaf through the various different bits of paper easily. And if you bring absolutely everything, you decrease the chance of you getting marks just because things might be missed.
Okay, so another question we've been asked is, how long will the portfolio section of the interview be? Well, since you've been through 2 of them recently, I'll ask you that question.
Yes, so the core surgical training interview was 10 minutes, and the person interviewing you had your portfolio for 10 minutes before, so they're able to leaf through, and then when they met you, really the discussion was to sort of prove and make sure that you weren't telling any fibs. And for the urology national training, that was 12 minutes, and the interviewer had your portfolio for 30 minutes. So about 10 to 12 minutes seems to be sort of the average time, which goes very quickly. You may be well be thinking before, what are we going to talk about for 10 minutes? But actually, if you've got a portfolio which is about that big, and you want to get through 8 to 10 sections of teaching the audits, then really you have to be quite snappy. So yeah, it's about 10 to 12 minutes is the answer.
Okay, so another question we've been asked is, how hard is it for an IMG to get a surgical training post in the UK? I've heard it's nearly impossible. Well, it depends really on what you mean by surgical training posts. So we have the UK training scheme, which it's not so easy to get into as an IMG, but we also have the medical training initiative, whereby trainees from overseas can come to recognised training posts, but not necessarily recognised training programme within the UK. And certainly this college can facilitate that post for some people. And I think that it is possible to be trained without necessarily going through the National Selection Training Scheme in somewhat slightly more piecemeal way. But I think the medical training initiative is really quite useful if you're coming from overseas, because you can get into a recognised training post for up to 2 years, which will train you to a certain extent. If you're looking at the end point, then it's possible to become a consultant in this country without actually having gone through a formal training programme, provided you can show evidence that you have done equivalent training post or equivalent experience, and that's through the CSER route, the CESR route. Okay, and there's more questions. So the question here, as a medical student, I've seen probably 100 surgeries roughly. It is too late to add these. Is it too late to add these into an e-logbook, or is there some other way I can demonstrate I've been there? Well, in terms of interview, you can actually just print out your logbook as long as you've had it verified. Or you can add them into e-logbook, but I think you would have to be very honest about when you did them, so when you accessed them. But I think any evidence, and verified evidence is always stronger evidence, any evidence is useful in terms of demonstrating what you have experienced. Okay. Then it says, I'm a medical student, I'm not sure how to start getting hands-on experience or exposure to surgery that I need for my portfolio. I don't get much through my university. What advice do you have? Well, I'll hand over to Lucinda for that one.
So we were very lucky at UCL. We've always been very encouraged to come into surgery. And in terms of how I got involved in theatres, is I would go to whatever surgical rotation I was on, and would tell the surgeons that I was interested in surgery. And on the whole, they were always very happy to have me back in theatres with them. And I think if you're on a surgical rotation, it's probably the easiest way to kind of access surgeons who would be happy to have you into theatres outside of your timetable time. But if you approach any of the surgeons in your hospitals where you're on placement, I think that most of them would be very open to having keen students join them.
Exactly. Okay, I think actually, I mean, I appreciate, and I certainly feel that there is less surgery in the undergraduate curriculum now than there was before. But if you seek, you will find, and most surgeons will be very happy to have you in theatre on one of your days when you're not supposed to be doing something else, or during the university term holidays. And you can also arrange to do tasters at some universities. They'll allow you to go off and do a taster in a surgical specialty, and that's, particularly if you're thinking about surgery, that's quite a good idea. Okay, another question we have is, what experiences would you recommend as evidence of teaching experience for a second-year medical student? I might hand you over to Lucinda for that one as well.
So I guess as a second-year medical student, you'd be quite limited in teaching to first years or people at school. But actually, I think as a second-year medical student, you're in a very strong position because first-year medical students are quite vulnerable in terms of they're just left home, they're in a new environment, it's a new way of learning. So I would definitely reach out to the first-year medical students because you've just gone through what they've gone through and you can provide pastoral support, and you can also help them with the knowledge of the first year and also this change in learning that they have to go through coming from school to university.
And I think there are many medical schools that have buddy systems for first and second years. And if you're really, really keen, you might want to set up a teaching session for the first years, for things that you've learnt in the first year, now that you're second year, you've consolidated in your own mind. And don't forget, in terms of national selection portfolios, if you've taught something else, so for instance, if you have taught piano or violin or something like that, it's evidence that you've taught. It's something you can put in your portfolio. Obviously, it's something you're going to weed out later on in your portfolio, but something you can put in if you don't have any other evidence. Okay, so another question we have is, you mentioned that we should include our IELTS results. Is this okay if it's already expired as they're only valid for 2 years? I think if you're applying for national selection, I think you have to have a validated English language document, whether it's IELTS or something else. So I think you would have to check the guidance for the interview that you're going to, whether or not it's acceptable. It is helpful to have it in there, but whether or not it's acceptable as long listing you into the interview is another matter. You'd have to check the guidance. Okay, did you find it difficult to manage working as a fresh junior doctor whilst doing an audit? I might ask Andrew that one.
Difficult, yes. I probably did find it a little bit difficult because when you're just starting out as a junior doctor, obviously you've got lots of new pressures, the demands of the job, maybe having to stay late. And often these projects, which you have to do, often you have to do sometimes in your own time, whether that means staying a little bit later or coming in on a Saturday or a Sunday. One thing I will mention, which Cinda mentioned, was choosing an audit which you're interested in. For example, I knew I wanted to do urology, so one of the first audits I did was looking at stents for patients with kidney stones. And if it's something that you're interested in, you don't mind spending a bit of time extra each day, or maybe coming in on a Sunday to collect a bit of data or write up a presentation, as you're often a bit more motivated to do these particular things. But yeah, certainly you do have to be a bit careful because you don't want to sort of burn yourself out by spending all weekend in hospital doing an audit, then having to arrive on the wards at 8 o'clock in the morning. So normally the way around that is just to be efficient with your time, to plan these things, so you make sure you've got plenty of months to complete the audit and you're not on a deadline when you only have a couple of weeks. And normally just by chipping away at it, just doing a little bit at a time, you normally can get the results that you need. Of course, the other alternative is to bring in other people as well. So you're not doing the whole thing on your own. To bring in some of your colleagues, and coming in at the weekend with one of your friends is certainly more fun than spending time on your own. But yeah, it can be a bit tricky sometimes, especially if you're on a busy job.
I might ask Lucinda the same question actually.
Yeah, it is tough, but it's to an extent the nature of the job, and for the rest of definitely your training career, you're always having to juggle multiple responsibilities and trying to achieve different things as well as doing the job. For me, I was aware that I was starting working as an F1, so I did leave myself a bit of leeway. So I just thought I'd use my first rotation just to settle into the job. And luckily, vascular was my second rotation, and I want to do vascular surgery. So I thought I'll give myself, that first rotation to settle down, and then I'll concentrate on my audit when I'm on vascular. And I picked something small, which was manageable. And as Andrew was saying, if you're sensible about it and you kind of chip away at these things and plan ahead, I think it's so important to plan your time. Then you learn to do the job and manage the stresses and do these extra things as well, because it's a skill that you need to learn going forwards.
In fact, when you become a trainee, as Andrew will tell you need to do an audit every year pretty much, don't you?
Yeah.
So another question we've been asked is, what is essential that you think are compulsory to have in your portfolio for somebody who's just started to work as a foundation trainee doctor in the UK, aspiring to get a surgical training post in the future as an IMG that will make their journey a lot easier? Well, I think the thing about the portfolio is that you you need to try your level best to get something in every section, but the thing to do is probably look at the checklist, look at the points scored for each thing, and go for the things that will score you the most points, but don't overdo it on each one. So, as I said earlier, don't focus all on one thing. If you can try and get 1 point across the board on every single section, you're more likely to score than getting maximum points in publications and nothing else. Clearly, logbook's important, and I think if you're going to go for presentations and publications, you need at least one of those, either a presentation or a publication. And of course, having your certificates together is something that you've already got. I think in terms of applying through national selection, it's helpful if you can do work-based assessments if you've never done them before, because you won't have the same competency framework as we have in the UK. So having evidence of that is going to help you as well. But I think trying to be as across the board as much as possible is important. We can ask another question. Will you be penalised or not looked favourably on if you don't have any prizes? Secondly, it can be very difficult to get a first author publication. What are your thoughts on collaborative authorship, e.g. via Star Search, etc.? Well, firstly, you won't be penalised if you don't score in every single part of the checklist, but clearly you want to score in every part of the checklist. You're not necessarily going to be dismissed out of hand if you have one part of the checklist that has no points. So that's the first part. Secondly, you don't necessarily have to have a first author publication. You clearly score greater points if you have a first author publication. With your second or third author, that doesn't matter so much. Collaborative authorships are a difficult thing because, I mean, I know that I've once been presented with a paper written by 154 authors, and I have to say that isn't really very strong evidence that you've been involved in a publication. So I would go for the one where there's maybe no more than 3 or 4 of you on the paper. Andrew, would you have a view on that?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Regarding the first part of the question, will you be penalised or not looked favourably on if you don't have any prizes? Well, for my core surgical training application, I didn't have any prizes. I still I'm high enough to get a job, so I hope that wasn't penalised. And secondly, can it be very difficult if you haven't got a first author publication? I think I had one. That's one of those things you just have to try and make up for it elsewhere if you can, but it's not vital. Not everyone can do it. What I will say to some of the medical students out there, we talked about kind of being efficient with the work that you do. So many of you will have written essays, or I think when I was a medical student, they were called student-selected components. I think there may be student-selected modules. So if you can go back and look at those and see if you can do a bit more work on them or jazz them up a little bit, then quite a lot of the societies, such as the Royal College of Surgeons or the Royal Society of Medicine, often will have a section where they're looking for essays or projects from medical students specifically. So if you do a little bit of research and see what's out there, you'll see there's quite a lot of opportunities to send your work to various different places. And I would, if you don't give it a go, you don't stand a chance of winning a prize. So I'd certainly look at some of the projects you may have done in the past and see if you can sort of rehash them for a prize in one of the society prizes.
And you don't have to have your publication in Nature or New England Journal of Medicine. A somewhat lesser impact journal is satisfactory in terms of gaining a point. Okay, we've been asked another question. As a graduate student, I spent the last 8 years as a manager in pubs. Is this something I should highlight in my portfolio, or is this something that should remain just in my CV? Well, first, certainly it should go on the CV, but if you don't have anything else in your management section and you've managed it well with some evidence that you've managed it well, for instance, feedback or correspondence in relation to that, or maybe made a success of what you did, that's certainly worth putting in the management section of your portfolio. There's no harm in that.
It's better than spending 8 years just in the pub, I guess. Perhaps shouldn't go in there.
Right. So regarding the e-logbook, there's another question. Does the patient ID count as patient identifiable data? Yes, it does. So you have to print out e-logbook without the patient ID. So the number counts as identifiable data. The patient, not candidate number, the patient's hospital number counts as identifiable data. So that you must not have that in your portfolio. And
you can print out just a summary,
yes,
which of just 30 cystoscopies, 30 appendixes, yes, which doesn't even mention patient's details.
Yes, and that's a satisfactory way of doing it. Although I understand that you can only do that if you pay.
Is that right?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
But so you may
true.
you may have to use a black highlighter even, or black pen, and take out anything that's identifiable, and that's acceptable because we know why you've done it. So another question: what is the best way to get involved in research as a medical student? Does unpublished research count for anything? I'll pass you on to Lucinda for that one.
So I was at UCL, so we had an IBSC, which kind of integrated research quite early on into our training. And then in terms of getting actually involved in writing a paper, I actually came about that when I was doing my clinical placements as a 4th, 5th year student, and just coming across different doctors with similar interests and getting involved in projects in that way. So if you don't have an IBSC, don't feel like it's harder to get into research, because actually the research that I ended up doing was just from contacts that I met in the hospital. So I think if you get on well with a particular team, or if you have a particular interest, to approach a team in the hospital and ask if they have any research projects going on. And quite often they will, and quite often they will be happy to have you as a part of it as well.
Okay, so to the second bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
In terms of unpublished research counting for anything, well, it doesn't count in the portfolio scoring system if you haven't published, but it's worth putting in your CV as work in progress, and certainly if it's submitted. If it's accepted, it counts. If it's accepted for publication, you have evidence that it's been accepted. For instance, a letter back from the publisher saying we've accepted this with minor changes, or we've accepted this for future publication, that counts for something. But if it's just been submitted, you don't score any points on the portfolio. But if it's on a surgical subject, it may count for something in your commitment to specialty. So it's worth putting it in there. So certainly put it in your CV, but always obviously be very honest about it. If it's not been submitted, if it's just in progress, say so. If it's been submitted but not accepted, say so. If it's been accepted, say so. So another question here: what are the key personality attributes you look for in an interview? From my experience from sitting on interview panels, well, I think the most important thing is that we look that you are being yourself in the interview. It's very easy to go into interview mode and try and be what you think we want you to be. Most of us can see through that. It takes all sorts to make a surgeon. If we're all the same, we'd be like little robots. We don't want that. As long as you're acceptable as a person who could be a surgeon, what we're looking for is potential. So if you have the potential to be a surgeon, it doesn't really matter if you have a slightly different personality from the person who was sitting in the chair before you. As long as you're acceptable as a sort of a person who can convey what they're like, who can communicate, who can think on their feet, and make sensible decisions. It doesn't really matter if you have a slightly different personality to the next person. Okay, further questions? All of us as well. Do we need to print out the NHS e-portfolio reflectives PDPs, or will that be available for the interviewers online should they be interested to view it? We don't have any access to anything online. All we have access to is what you bring with you. What I do not recommend is if you have literally done 200 work-based assessments, I don't recommend you print them all out. I recommend you print a summary and maybe a selection of each type of work-based assessment. And I know you're all going to pick your best one, so that's what we expect. But we don't have access to your portfolio online in National Selection. Another question we have here is, what about ACF posts in surgery, and what's the difference between ACF and the normal core surgery training? Well, ACF posts, for those that don't know, are the academic clinical fellow posts, and they are by separate interview for those people who want to be academics. So we have academic posts in foundation, we have academic posts in core, we have academic posts in higher training as well. For the most part, in most parts of the country, these are equivalent in terms of selection to the standard posts with an academic enhancement to them. In terms of the actual training, so in core training, you'll spend 25% of your time usually in academia and 75% of your time in clinical training. The expectation is that you will still complete the same competencies at the end of your training period. So in other words, you would have to fulfill the same number of work-based assessments, the same things that are expected for the non-academic training within your time. And that's the expectation. Okay, so another question we have here is, how much emphasis is given to completion of surgical courses whilst at medical school, as they can be expensive? Well, there's no real emphasis. No one is expecting you to have done it, but clearly those people that have done a course, a surgical course while at medical school, is showing a commitment to specialty, and I think that's something that we don't necessarily actively look for, but we'll notice. I know that Lucinda has done a surgical course, at least one, as a medical student. And for instance, we run the student surgical skills course at the college, and that's not that expensive. Not expensive, certainly some of the courses that we go on. Yes, it's I think it's £65 each, roughly. So it's not so bad for a course with a certificate. But you don't have to have done one. It really is a case of, if you want to embellish your portfolio, that's one way of doing it.
Sometimes for the courses, you won't necessarily get a certificate if you do this, but sometimes these courses need people to help out, or particularly some of the ones which are quite simulation based. Sometimes we need people to pretend to be patients. It's quite a good job for a medical student, because they may have to do that for 10 minutes, but then they get to sit through the rest of the course. Well, you won't get a certificate. You won't actually have to pay. It's quite a good way of sort of seeing what the course is about, also learning quite a lot as well.
Okay, so another question: is there some way you can find the checklist online before interviews to make sure you tick all on most of the boxes? Yes. So the link that I showed on one of my slides earlier was the link to, in fact, what used to be called the London Deanery, which has the core surgery checklist on it, and whichever local education area, Health Education England area is running your particular specialty, on their website there will be a checklist if there is one available. So the London Deanery currently has the one for core surgery.
For urology, you have to mark your own portfolio.
You do for general surgery and for core as well, but it's then looked at again in the end.
Yeah, and they give you a checklist to mark it, so you have to put that in the front of your portfolio.
They won't necessarily agree with you on it, but at least they get you to mark it. Okay. Would you recommend taking the MRCS Part B and completing the MRCS before application, or is it better to focus efforts elsewhere and wait for core training? That's an interesting question, because slight conflict of interest here. I am the chair of the exams committee for the college, so I actually manage the MRCS for the College of Surgeons in England. I have to say I would not recommend taking the MRCS Part B before going into core. I think it's very much an examination that you should take while you're in core training, because that's what it's testing you on. Taking the Part A is very much a theory-based examination, and it's not such a bad thing to have taken that in foundation, or towards the end of foundation, I would say. But I wouldn't recommend taking the Part B. I don't think it's not going to score you anything more, and I think you will do better in it if you take it actually while you're doing core training. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I took my Part A before core and my Part B during core. I think that's very sensible.
Yes. Okay. Is it important to do research projects in the surgical specialty you're interested in? No. So what we're looking for at junior training level is that you have an aptitude, whatever degree of aptitude that is, for doing research and understand evidence-based practice. It doesn't matter what it's in. So even if you've done a research project in psychiatry, because that's what came by your way, and if you've demonstrated research principles in that research project because that's all you've done, that's okay. It shows you've done some research. You're not necessarily going to score much higher just because you've done a fantastic, very super surgical research project. It's really showing evidence that you can engage in research. Okay, next question. How many logs of surgical experience should a competitive CST applicant aim to have? Would you like to answer that, Andrew?
Yes, that's difficult. Depends on your speciality, how much exposure you've had to that speciality in core surgical training. I think the main thing is
CST applicant, so it's pre-CST.
Oh, so pre-CST.
Yeah.
Okay, looking back, I think that the fact that you're keeping a logbook is first a positive thing. It shows commitment to speciality. I don't think there is necessarily an answer to that. I think, speaking from my own experience, I had anywhere between 100 and 200 operations on my logbook. I don't know if that's competitive compared to my peers at the time, but I'd kept a record, and I think that boded well in the interview.
I think we all know that there is a particular dearth of foundation programs with surgery in them, and even those that do have surgery, and you may only have 4 months or if you're lucky, 6 months of surgery. So we know that exposure to surgery in foundation training is not necessarily as high as it used to be or could be. So I think the fact that you have a logbook, as Andrew says, is what counts. The fact that you kept a logbook, the fact that you've noted where you've observed, where you've assisted, and where you've even sutured. I know Lucinda does some suturing. That's the important thing. I don't think there's a number of cases that's important. Okay. So another question we have is, do presentations count if you're a named author but did not actually give the presentation? Should it be included? The answer is yes. It does count because you were involved in the work. I think if you want to clarify on your CV what you contributed to that presentation, it actually helps us. So for instance, if somebody else presented, somebody else may have presented it because you were off sick, for instance, or somebody else may have presented it because they did a large proportion of the work, but so did you. So it's worth saying what you did in anything that's been presented. So in other words, whether you conceived the idea, whether you gathered the data, whether you helped process the data, it's worth having that as a sentence or two underneath, particularly if you didn't present it. And it should be included on your CV. Okay, looks like we've come to the end of time, so that's all the time we have for questions. We'll keep responding to your questions after the webinar has ended. So thank you very much for tuning in. Just to remind you that affiliate membership will give you access to all these things that we've mentioned earlier. It isn't very expensive, and we'll keep in touch with you via your membership. The regular e-newsletters are particularly helpful because they'll tell you about what's been going on, whether we're running anything, workshops or anything near you, and in fact you'll hear about things like this webinar. So thank you very much. But just to let you know that there are a few affiliate events that are coming up soon. There's a Surgical Trainees Conference that will be held in Cardiff in May, and one of my council member colleagues, Scarlett McNanny, will be running a webinar on bullying and harassment, which is one of her raison d'etres, I think. And then we'll be running So You Want to Be a Surgeon in Liverpool in September. So please feel free to register for these and come along. So thank you very much. That's all the time we have. So this was, as you know, part of the college's National Careers Week programme. Please visit our website to see what else is going on. We're running things every day this week, and you can actually look back and see what was done yesterday as well. Thank you very much.